us to go teach in Virginia. What is all this? Kit directed our fantastic production of Merchant of Venice. He directed Cabaret and like about a million other things. And I should just stop talking because if I do Kit's bio, I will be here all night. But we're so glad y'all here. I think we should just go ahead and get started just real quick for those of you who just joined us. If you would like to, please go ahead and turn your cameras on because this will be an interactive. And Kit says if you want to ask questions, just start talking.
Yeah. Wow, look at all you guys. There's a lot of folks. So Becky came to me and said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to talk about Hamlet." And then when the administration decided maybe okay they could let me do that, then I started thinking about what I wanted to do. First off, I want to give credit where credit is due. You may hear some incredibly brilliant things this evening. Likely, I am not the one to say them. You will be. But anything that's remotely brilliant that I might have to say, I want to credit to this man here. This man is Harold Goddard, and Harold Goddard is my Shakespeare Bible. If any of you are so inclined, go to Amazon and buy Volume 1 and Volume 2 of The Meaning of Shakespeare by Harold Goddard. These are books that will absolutely rock your Shakespeare world. I read them for fun. They're sort of, as other people would read Dostoevsky or read the Bible or read, Harry Potter, I read this because it does all that for me. So a lot of the things that I will say tonight are derived in part from Harold Goddard. So you can leave now and just go buy the book. Don't. So what I want to do first is I want to talk about first lines. We're here to talk about Hamlet. But really, as any of us knows who's ever studied a Shakespeare play in depth, or has been in one of Shakespeare's works, or has directed one of Shakespeare's works, or has seen many or one many times, or whatever, you all know that that in talking about one, you're going to talk about a lot of them, at least by implication. I am, to begin with, I am a Stratfordian. I totally believe there was a Shakespeare and he wrote these plays. So let's just get rid of that.
Yeah.
I also believe that it does us no good whatsoever to think about that kind of thing, because whether it was Shakespeare, whether it was Hugh Grant, whether it was Max Tachis in his own living room, the fact of the matter is somebody wrote these plays. Right. And we know that one person wrote these plays if we read them all, because they line up almost remarkably chronologically as chapters of an individual single work. And I take that and I say to myself, well, then I can treat Shakespeare as a living, breathing, albeit dead guy who has a lot to offer me, and that's why I've called this one man's Hamlet. What you're getting tonight is going to be things about Hamlet / Shakespeare that turn me on, that really that excite me about the work, about the playwright, about the characters. You're going to get a little glimpse about what makes me, in a way, because I've been studying this stuff most of my life, and it's with me every single day. And what I want to do is approach Hamlet from a first line point of view. And I want everybody to think about any Shakespeare they've read, or any Shakespeare that they've seen, or any Shakespeare that they've been in. Shakespeare's first lines are remarkable. And in many, many respects, I think we can all agree, set up dynamics, set up themes, set up aspects of those plays that work through the entire 4 or 5 acts of these plays. One that most everybody knows is Two Households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona where we lay our scene. From ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean. Romeo and Juliet. The entire theme of that play is encapsulated in those 4 lines, right at the beginning of the play. And it lets us know where we're going. It lets us know what themes we're going to be dealing with. I personally think that it lets us know that the idea of star-crossed lovers and that Romeo and Juliet being some sort of astrological thing is complete hogwash. But tonight isn't about Romeo and Juliet, it's about Hamlet. So we'll move on. Tush, never tell me. I take it much unkindly that thou, Iago, who hast had my purse, as if the strings were thine, shouldst know of this. Splud, but you'll not hear me. Othello. Again, it begins in a tone that is absolutely ripe for this play. Iago thrives on vulgarity. And this play begins, the two first speeches of Othello begin with cussing. Tush, never tell me. Splud, but you'll not hear me. Sets us up for the people we're going to meet, the themes we're going to be exploring. Julius Caesar. What is Julius Caesar if not a play about mob rule, and how the Senate descends to the level of the mob in their decision-making and their actions. Hence home, you idle creatures, get you home. Sets us up. We know exactly where we're going from there. A couple of more that I dearly love. Henry IV, Part 1. So shaken as we are, so wan with care, find we a time for frighted peace to pant. And here we have Henry IV, which is on the heels of Richard II, story-wise. You've got a nation in crisis, and the king saying, "Stop. Let's breathe. Let's enjoy some peace and quiet for a time." Now, if anybody who knows Shakespeare knows that that's not about to last, but that's the way it goes. Twelfth Night, one of the most famous. Almost everybody knows this. If music be the food of love, play on. Give me excess of it, that surfeiting the appetite may sicken and so die. What's Twelfth Night about? That. And it even, at the ending, is equivocal, just as those first lines are. The beginning and the ending meet through the play. When shall we three meet again? In thunder, lightning, or in rain? Three witches at the top of Macbeth, which set everything up. Because we know that that play is all about, the, what's the word for it? For the not down on earth and not the supernatural. That's it. There it is. I need to have another sip of this, clearly. King Lear, an interesting opening line that I've been thinking about a lot lately. My students and I and a couple of teachers did a reading of King Lear recently. Max Tachis joined us for it. The first line of that play is interesting. I thought the king had more affected the Duke of Albany than Cornwall. It's a question. It's uncertainty. Nothing is clear. What we thought the world was about is all akimbo. And that's the play. The Tempest. Boatswain, here, master, what cheer? Good, speak to the mariners. Fall to it, yarely, or we run ourselves aground. Bestir, bestir. All about a shipwreck and what happens because of that. Henry V, again, one of the more, Max, you know Henry V, you know the beginning of Henry V, don't you? What is it? Your turn.
I don't know the lines, but it's about setting up that you're seeing a play. I mean, it's about...
Oh, bastard.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, for a muse of fire. What is it? Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention. A kingdom for a stage, princes to act, etc., etc. And monarchs to thank you. I have help. To be introduced later. And that brings me to Hamlet. If I'm correct in leading up to the opening lines of Hamlet, which excite me no end, then Hamlet's opening lines really introduced for us everything we're going to encounter in the play, if I'm right. And given that this is one man's Hamlet, and it's me, I'm right. And the opening lines to Hamlet are really very special. And we've explored some that are poetic, that are full of imagery, etc., etc. The Hamlet opening three lines are thus. Who's there? Nay, answer me, stand and unfold yourself. Long live the king. And I defy anybody to tell me ultimately that that's not a synopsis of Hamlet. That Hamlet is not about at least one man and possibly many more, and a few women, exploring and finding out who the hell they are. Yep. Which is another reason why I love the play, because anybody can play Hamlet. Now, some of you may say, wait, what? Anybody can play Hamlet? That's nonsense. But the fact of the matter is, anybody can play Hamlet, even Richard Colley, who's one of my students, or former students. And I'll tell you why. Because in Hamlet, in the character of Hamlet is everything anybody has ever experienced or felt. So if you are assigned to play Hamlet, you're going to get something right because it's familiar to you, because it's what you've been through, because it's what you are experiencing, will experience, and what you're thinking and what you're feeling through the entire play. Now, I'm not a big fan of assigning Freudian interpretation to Shakespeare or Jungian interpretation to Shakespeare or what have you. I'm very much a fan of assigning personal interpretation to Shakespeare, because I'll tell you what, ladies and gents, Shakespeare knew it all 400 years before there ever was a Freud. 400 years before there ever was a Jung. He knew it all. And all of that's all we're doing in our Freudian analysis or Jungian analysis or any other sort of technical pseudo-scientific analysis of Shakespeare's work is attaching labels that work for us to what was true then and now. So as we progress this evening, I'm going to be talking about things that work for me, things that the play means for me. All right, and so in brief, the play opens with guards on a battlement who have experienced the not quite scary, but certainly unsettling experience of a ghost appearing before them in the past few nights. And on the battlements, the ghost of the King of Denmark appears to these soldiers. What I want to approach this evening is the little things that make a difference, the little things that really thrill me. People for 400 years have been talking about ghosts. People have been talking about the ghost of Hamlet's father, the ghost of Hamlet Sr. But there are things about this ghost that are really important to know and are really important to reflect on. And that is, how is this ghost dressed? Does anybody know? Who's been in the play? Who's read the play? Somebody, just turn on your mic and speak up. I don't care who you are.
He's dressed in his military gear.
Who said that?
Me.
Richard Colley. Awesome. Yes. I would suggest not even dressed in his military gear, but dressed in full armor. All in armor, capape, head to toe. He's presenting, this ghost is presenting this sort of medieval, mythical, Teutonic sort of image of war. Before whom? 3 soldiers standing guard on the battlements. It's very important to remember. Sometimes it's not, and sometimes it's not done that way. Sometimes and even in my production, it's not been done that way where the ghost is in full armor, but it's absolutely essential. And we'll get to why in a little bit, but just remember that. And what's the ghost there to do? Somebody tell me. The ghost is there to meet with somebody. Who?
Hamlet.
He's there to meet with Hamlet.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. He's come from purgatory, from the flames of purgatory and whatnot, to meet with his son, Hamlet. What has happened? What's happened is very simple. Hamlet Sr., Hamlet's father, has died. We don't know how. That's also important to remember. Actors, you know this from your acting class. It's extremely important not to play the end. It's extremely important not to play the next scene. We have to remember that we don't know how he died. And he comes to the battlements in full armor, capape, to meet with his son Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark, supposed King of Denmark, if the former king is now dead. What else has happened in the interim, however? I know somebody can tell me.
His uncle took over.
Yeah. Well, what else? Yeah. Who said that?
His uncle took over. That was me. Roneet's mom.
Hey, Roneet's mom. Yeah. His uncle took over, but his uncle did something else as well. What did his uncle do?
Married his mother.
Married his mom. Yeah. So we've got this guy, okay, this ghost, come to meet with his son to tell him what has happened in the kingdom. All right. We know that there's strange things afoot because one of the soldiers early on in the very first scene says, "'Tis bitter cold and I am sick at heart." That's Shakespeare code, ladies and gentlemen. "'Tis bitter cold and I am sick in heart" means, oh my God, things are fucked, what's going on? Okay, I don't know if he would have used those words, but that's a good contemporary translation. So the ghost comes to meet with Hamlet. Does he speak with these other guys? Nope. Nope, he just wants to speak with Hamlet. So they go and get their friend Hamlet, who's the Prince of Denmark, right? In the interim, we are introduced to King Claudius, the brother, who is now King of Denmark, right? And I told you I wanted to pay close attention to very little things that might get over, that are, oh my God. Great, my kids are watching and I just said fuck. Oops, okay. Yeah, hi. So Claudius.
Quarter in the jar.
Claudius, there you go. Claudius is a king, is the new king of Denmark, and he's basically addressing his people for the first time in his first speech of his first scene. It goes like this: "Though yet of Hamlet, our dear brother's death, the memory be green, and that it us befitted to bear our hearts in grief, and our whole kingdom to be contracted in one brow of woe, yet so far hath discretion fought with nature that we with wisest sorrow think on him, together with remembrance of ourselves. Therefore, our sometime sister, now our queen, the imperial jointress to this warlike state, have we, as 'twere with a defeated joy, with an auspicious and a dropping eye, with mirth in funeral and with dirge in marriage, in equal scale, weighing delight and dole, taken to wife." Fair enough, but I want you to look at a couple of things. Whenever you see the play again, whenever you read the play again, or when you go dig it out of your bookshelf after we're done tonight, I want you to look at two things. One, the first word of the speech. Though. What does that tell you? Max, what does it tell you?
Got other things on his mind. It's
Like what?
like the incoming Fortinbras experience.
Like what? What does though tell you? What does though specifically do?
It's the Shakespearean word for but.
Yeah?
I
Which
mean,
means what?
cluing
Which
us
means
in.
that while he's talking about this,
Something else is going on.
something else is going on, right? Shakespeare drops an enormous clue in the first word of Claudius's speech, "Though yet of Hamlet, our dear brothers, blah, 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 blah," which tells us to be wary, because this guy knows that something's not right. This guy knows that though we should be doing this, we are instead doing that. And it's all set up and it's perfect. I'd also like you to look at something that I just noticed now again, not for the first time, but for a while. "Therefore our sometime sister, now our queen, the imperial jointress to this warlike state." We cannot forget that. I challenge you, when you go and you look up Hamlet and you read the play again, or you see the play, or you watch the play, or you're in the play, I challenge you to mark down for yourself how many times war, in some respect, is mentioned in this play. We start with soldiers on the battlements. We're met with a ghost in full armor. We segue to a court scene in which the new king talks about the warlike state, etc., etc. We're not allowed to forget that this is a play about war. Now, one of the really exciting things about Shakespeare, to me, is that war exists on two planes. The war we think of is men in arms fighting against each other on battlefields. The war Shakespeare is continually trying to remind us of is the war that's within. And we're reading a play, we're talking about a play in which a young man is going to reveal to us in but a scene or two the immense warfare that is going on within his own soul. We have the Prince of Denmark living in a warlike state, And within that, he himself is about to go to war in a very private sense. I find all that sort of unbearably exciting. So to make a long story short, Hamlet's friends go to Hamlet and okay, I'll share with you a bias. The really big scenes, the really big speeches in this play, they're really fun. They're great to do. If you want, I'll do one or two for you. I don't necessarily want to because they bore me. It's the little things that are much more exciting to me. Think about it. You got Hamlet who is complaining about this, who is complaining about that, who's complaining about the other thing. You got Hamlet who's bemoaning that he feels this way, bemoaning that he feels that way, bemoaning that of course he does. He's a young man in extremis. Okay? If any one of us had wanted to write such a play, Max, if you wanted to write such a play, if any of us wanted to write such a play where a character gets up on stage and by himself just bitches and moans about the stuff going on with him for 3.5 hours, Lisa Millette, the artistic director of City Life Theater Company, would say, yeah, right, go elsewhere. Already been done, right? But what's fascinating is a speech, and this is really what I want to sort of turn you guys onto. I want to turn you guys onto a speech that sometimes it's just outright cut from the play. And what I want to do is I want to move ahead to Act 1, Scene 4, where Hamlet's friends have said, oh my God, dude, your father just appeared to us, all in armor. We don't know what's going on. And Hamlet says, no. My father's just been put in the grave. Dude, really, seriously, he came to us. He's all in armor, and I think maybe he wants to talk to you. Really? Did he look like this? And did he look like that? And did he wear his thing like this? And did he wear his thing like that? Yeah, exactly like that. Dude, you got to come with us. And so Hamlet goes to the battlements the next night to wait for the ghost. But the ghost doesn't come right away. The ghost makes them wait, as ghosts do. Which brings us to a very interesting digression. And for a very long time, this speech in this play has sort of stood out as something that I didn't really get. Because I'm such a fan of Shakespeare's integration, that something Shakespeare does in Scene 1 pays off in Act 3, Scene 4, that something he does in Act 2, Scene 1 pays off in the last scene, that the themes all intertwine and are braided together, and they all are working together. But this moment in this scene has always sort of bothered me. They're waiting up on the battlements. And Horatio, Hamlet's best friend, as we know and learn throughout the play, says, it draws near the season wherein the spirit held his wont to walk. In other words, what? It's almost time for the ghost to appear. And suddenly there's a flourish of trumpets and a cannon shot from inside the castle. Now remember, this is something that is often cut from the play. And after thinking about it today, I'm thinking maybe that's a mistake. Because Horatio, his friend, after the cannon goes off, says, what does this mean, my lord? And Hamlet says, now remember, you've got a new king, recently married to the queen, still celebrating, still carousing and all that. And everything else that a new husband and a new wife might be doing. And don't think I'm making that up, because it comes in later. Hamlet says, the king doth wake tonight and take his rouse, keeps wassail, and the swaggering upspring reels. And as he drains his draughts of Rhenish down, the kettle drum and trumpet thus bray out the triumph of his pledge. In other words, every time the king drains a bottle of beer, the cannons shoot and the trumpets blare. It's kind of like a game of, the ping pong ball in the cup. Every time the ball hits the cup, somebody has to drink. Sort of in reverse. Every time the king drinks, the trumpets go, the drums go. And Horatio says, is it a custom? And I hope you're all sitting comfortably, because Hamlet goes on for a while. He says, aye, marry is't. But to my mind, though I am native here and to the manner born, it is a custom more honored in the breach than the observance. This heavy-headed revel, east and west, makes us traduced and taxed of other nations. They clap us drunkards, and with swinish phrase soil our addition. And indeed, it takes from our achievements, though performed at height, the pith and marrow of our attribute. So oft it chances in particular men that for some vicious mole of nature in them, as in their birth, wherein they are not guilty, since nature cannot choose his origin, by the o'ergrowth of some complexion, oft breaking down the pales and forts of reasons, or by some habit that too much o'erleavens the form of plausive manners, that these men, carrying, I say, the stamp of one defect, by nature's livery or fortune's star, their virtues else, be they as pure as grace, as infinite as man may undergo, shall in the general censure take corruption from that particular fault. The dram of eel doth all the noble substance of a doubt to his own scandal. And then the ghost comes in. But I want to stop because I want to look at that speech. I had to read through it pretty quickly because we're, don't have all night. But I am spellbound by that speech of all of them. Hamlet speaks alone to his other characters on the stage or to the audience 17,423 times during Hamlet.
Wow.
I might be, And my question always has been, what about this speech informs the rest of the play? And I was talking about it today. And he's talking about this thing that we do that other nations have talked about that colors us in a bad light, right? And by extension then, a guy can be the greatest guy in the world, but because he has one little fault, the entire world looks at him with disdain. And that's a very interesting thing to be saying here at this point in this play. I want to remind everybody that where has Hamlet been before he came back for his father's funeral and his mother's hasty marriage to his uncle? Where has he been?
Wittenberg.
Yeah, doing what?
Schooling?
Schooling.
Mm-hmm. He's been at school in Wittenberg. This has been one of my favorite little sort of Shakespearean trivial points for about a bazillion years. And again, that's hyperbole. What happened in Wittenberg? What very important thing happened in Wittenberg? Anybody know? Think about it. Go back to your medieval history. Go back to your religious history. What happened in Wittenberg?
Martin Luther?
Hey, who said that?
Right here.
Don't just say, oh, great, good job. Yeah, Martin Luther, what'd he do?
He broke from the church. He published all the wrongdoings of the papacy and the church itself. And
Yeah, sure, I'll buy that. And how'd he do it?
I don't know that.
Hung him on the door of the cathedral
Where?
in Wittenberg.
Hey! Yeah.
I got nothing.
No, that's right.
Okay.
So Martin Luther posted all of the Protestant, reforms on the door of the church in Wittenberg. Supposedly. I'm sitting next to a PhD in medieval history and drama. So I'm being fact-checked as we go. Pay no attention to the woman behind the curtain.
That should make them feel really comfortable.
Yeah, I know, right? So, no, she's here just because it's fun. Because I'm scared. No, seriously, think about that for a second. Why Wittenberg? Laertes at the beginning of the play is off to go to where? Laertes is Hamlet's friend and Polonius' son. Where's Laertes off to?
Paris.
France.
Paris.
France.
How many cities are there in Europe? Let's see. Shakespeare wrote this around 1600, and he's writing it around a time around the story takes place in the 1400s. So, how many cities are there in Europe?
Many.
More than 4, right? Why Wittenberg? I like to think, because I think that Shakespeare kind of knew what he was talking about, that Wittenberg is symbolic for this notion of breaking with the past. And I want you to remember that, breaking with the past. So here we have a student who has come from Wittenberg for his father's funeral and his mother's marriage. and he's feeling really great about both, right? I mean, the melancholy Dane, as we've come to call him. And he gives this speech about virtue and fault, and how you can be the best of men, and by one fault you can be just dismissed, right? That sounds a lot to me like somebody who knows just enough to get him in trouble. Think about it for a second, right? You've got, I mean, I'm sorry, how many of us went to college? How many of us were sophomores? We were all sophomores at one point. What does sophomore mean? Somebody tell me. What does the word sophomore mean?
I don't know. Never thought of it.
From
I
philosophy?
know it.
Who's that?
Olivia, your child.
Olivia, what does sophomore mean?
Sophomore means wise fool. Thank you.
And I shall now give the rest of the evening over to Olivia. Yeah, exactly, wise fool. So you put this speech together with where Hamlet's been and where Hamlet's going, and you've got a perfect case of somebody who knows a whole lot about a very little, or a very little about a whole lot, who is approaching life from a not quite mature sophomoric point of view. And that's something I never really sort of came to grips with about this speech until virtually today, when I was going over the play and thinking about what I wanted to talk about tonight. All right. So when you go through the play, or when you see the play, if they cut it, be critical of that. And two, if they don't, think about it a lot, because I've always wondered what it's doing here, and I think we just found out. What it's doing here is it's setting up Hamlet's exploration of fault. And who among us has not been very eager to go through the world pointing fingers and you did this, and you did that, and you did this, and you did that, and you're guilty of this, and you're guilty of that. We've all done it. And that's where Hamlet is at this point in the play, before meeting the ghost of his father, when he's completely upset about his father's funeral and his mother's marriage. He's thinking that everybody is a worthless piece of crap. So of course, he utters this speech about fault. All right? It's important to remember, because then he goes through the rest of the play and encounters everybody. And I think that this speech, in a way, can be applied in Hamlet's young mind to almost everybody he encounters in this play. So I just want to talk about that a little bit. He meets the ghost, and this is where we really get into it, and we got to go quick. But he meets the ghost, my thing is not, and for the first time, the ghost talks. Now, Hamlet, as we know, remembers his father as sort of a man among men, the best in love, the best in war, the best in, interior design, whatever it is, right? This is how Hamlet remembers his father. And yet at the same time, one wonders, as he's thinking about this impending meeting with his father, what his father's going to be like, what his father is doing. I mean, come on, the ghost of his father has just appeared to people in Elsinore. Something can't be right, right? So he meets with the ghost, who admits that I am my father's spirit. Okay, that answers that question. Doomed for a certain term to walk the night, and for the day confined to fast in fires, till the foul crimes done in my days of nature are burnt and purged away. But that I am forbid to tell the secrets of my prison house, I would a tale unfold, whose lightest word would harrow up thy soul, freeze thy young blood, make thy two eyes like stars start from their spheres, thy knotted and combined locks part, and each particular hair to stand on end like quills upon the fretful porpentine. Okay, so that's a Shakespeare trick. A really good way of saying, it's really amazing where I am, it's really bad, but I don't want to tell you. Which is because nobody really knows, right? I mean, in this very play, we know that death is the undiscovered country, right? So obviously Shakespeare can't be all that specific about it. And Hamlet's all in extremis meeting his father. And what does his father do? And this is really the whole point of the evening, finally. His father says, list, oh, list. If thou didst ever thy dear father love, oh God, says Hamlet, revenge his foul and most unnatural murder. Well, that's news. Hamlet's father has been murdered, we now find out. Hamlet says, murder. Ghost says, murder most foul, as in the best it is. But this most foul, strange, and unnatural. And that's where I want to stop for a second. Because we all know what happens next. We all know that Hamlet says, oh yeah, absolutely. Let me know what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to sweep to my revenge. My father has been killed by my uncle, who then married my mother. And it's all done. It's all in my head. I know exactly what I have to do. I have to go and I have to avenge my father's death. Remember I talked about those little things that make a huge difference? That's what I wanted to really look at tonight. I want everybody to look at these words here. What the ghost says to Hamlet. The ghost says, revenge his foul and most unnatural murder. Hamlet says, murder? The ghost says, murder most foul, as in the best it is, but this most foul, strange, and unnatural. Murder most foul, as in the best it is. What's he saying? It's the most important line in the play.
It's always foul.
Always.
So even in revenge, in revenge, it would be foul.
So what is his father asking him to do?
Damn himself.
And there's the play. That is why, not because his father was killed by his uncle, not because his mother married his uncle, not because he came from Wittenberg and he's a snotty student, not because his friend Horatio might be pulling his leg, not for any of those reasons, but because his father is asking him to do something damnable, that we have 3.5 more acts of a play. And I don't say that lightly. I say that because I ask any one of you what you would do in any situation that suddenly makes you a divided soul. That suddenly puts you in a situation where you want something so much that your life depends on it, knowing full well that the very thing you want is the thing that will be your ruin. It is said that Hamlet is a tragedy of a man who could not make up his mind. It is said that Hamlet is the tragedy of a man who was going through all this Freudian business with his mother and his father. It is said all kinds of things, but the fact of the matter is we don't have to assign any of that to this play. The fact is that Hamlet has been asked to do something that by the requester's own admission shouldn't be done. And if you ask me, that's conflict, right? And if you ask me, that's how plays are made. And Hamlet spends the next 3.5 acts trying to figure this out. Now, is he trying to figure out if the ghost is telling the truth? Sure. Is he trying to figure out if he should really do it? Sure. But it's all because he is being asked to do something that, frankly, and again, one man's Hamlet, that no man should be asked to do. And that's the tragedy of the play. Not that he is asked, not that he considers it, but that he arranges matters in such a way that he's unable to free himself from the grasp of that request. It's an interesting thing that his father says as he leaves. Father's ghost hears the rooster crowing. The morn is near. Here it comes. Fare thee well at once. The glowworm shows the matin to be near and begins to pale his ineffectual fire. Adieu, adieu, Hamlet, remember me. Again, those little things that to me make such a big difference. Look at the word remember for me. What does remember mean? What does remember mean?
Don't forget me.
Yeah. But also what else? Take it apart. Take the word apart.
Oh,
Remember
remember me twice
me.
again. Remember again.
Put me back
Put
together.
together.
Bring me here. Do for me what I cannot do for myself. Now remember, who is Hamlet Sr.? Hamlet Sr. is King of Denmark. Sure, granted. Hamlet Sr. is also a warrior whose only appearances in the play are in full armor, ready to do battle. It's really important to remember that. So we've got lots and lots of play, right? Lots and lots of play that goes on. And I could keep going. I swear to God to you guys, I could keep going for 3 hours. I could talk as long as this play is about this. But what I'd really love to do, now that I've sort of, dropped some ideas in there and sort of shed some light on maybe this word or that word, what I'd love to do is I'd like to know what about this play fascinates you. I'd like to talk about the stuff that works on you. The truth is that this thing's been around for more than 400 years, right? Why? What's the fascination? What's the pull? I picked Hamlet to talk about because it's like, the top of the mountain. So speak up. Hey, Celista, how are you?
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Michael West, how are you? Oh my God, there's so many friendly faces. This is great. So what about Hamlet? What can I clarify? What can we argue about? What do you disagree with? What do you think? That's what I want to know. Max,
I have a question. I have a question about the ongoing debate about whether Hamlet is mad or not.
Yeah.
And is it a ruse? And if it's a ruse, what's his benefit at it? I'm not sure that he is mad, or just the whole conflict that's going on with him results in people observing him and saying he must be mad.
Right. Well, remember that after he's met with the ghost, he has more to do with his friends, right?
Right.
And he basically tells them, he says, no matter what may happen from here on out, I'm going to put on this antic disposition. So obviously, there's two things at play here. One, yes, he's putting something on. But also, he is an extremist. Clearly, the dude's going through some stuff. So the lines between those two get very blurry, right?
Right.
But what does acting crazy buy him? What is... Let's go
No
back to
responsibility. It buys him no responsibility.
Yeah. Who said that?
Roneet's mom.
Okay, is Roneet's mom like the smartest person in the room? What's going on here? Yeah, no kidding. I want to go to Hamlet's first couple of lines. When Claudius has addressed the court and then turns his attention to individual people. These people want to go off to there. These people want to go. Laertes wants to go to Paris. Okay, Polonius, I'm gonna leave Polonius alone for a while. You want to go off to Paris? I'll let you do that. And he turns to Hamlet. Hamlet, now what's going on with you? But now my cousin Hamlet and my son. Hamlet says, a little more than kin and less than kind. King Claudius says, how is it the clouds still hang on you? Not so, my lord. I am too much in the sun. How does that relate to what Steve has just suggested, or Steve's question, and what we're trying to get to here? I am too much in the sun. That can mean many things. I think it means one thing in particular. What's that? What could it mean? It could mean, I'm among all these people who are happy and I'm sad. It could mean that. I think I am too much in everyone's eye. I am too much on view. I'm too much on display. And I think it's also a keen and important line to remember when we're talking about the character of Hamlet. So, as Roneet's incredibly intelligent mother said, what does feigning madness buy Hamlet?
Freedom.
Freedom. From what?
Responsibility.
Scrutinization.
Scrutiny, responsibility.
Expectation, should, shouldn't. I'm going to throw in a word here. Everything. That's a perfectly fine answer to the question. It frees him from everything. If Hamlet is feeling like he's too much in the sun, there's too much expectation. He's the prince of goddamn Denmark, man. And a hugely political thing has happened. You know all eyes are on him. I am too much in the sun. So what am I going to do? I can't do the thing I'm going to do unless people don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to act like a madman. I think that gives us a reason to believe that it is truly feigned. There's another sort of practical reason why I like the whole madness in the play, and that is it gives us a lot of the humor.
Yes.
I've directed this play, and one of the things that I told my cast at the first rehearsal is, let the tragedy take care of itself. There's plenty of that. We're going to try to find the funny stuff. There's also plenty of that. Okay, and some of it comes, a lot of it comes from Hamlet being a wackadoodle, right? Which is totally fake. So of course, so he feigns madness to be able to do what he needs to do, to find out what he needs to find out. You know, I like to call this play not a whodunit, but a whydunit. You know, because we're trying to really get a grip on everybody's motives. Which brings me kind of really quickly to the play within the play scene. Those of us who know the play well know that it's the crisis scene in the play. It's the scene the whole thing's leading up to, where Hamlet has decided he's going to put on a play. The actors come to town, basically. The actors come to the castle, and Hamlet's all thrilled to see them, and he asks them if they can put on a certain play. And oh, not only can you put on a certain play, but can you insert in it a speech I write for it? Okay, so that we'll do this play in front of the king, and it'll show the king his own crimes, and the way he reacts will tell me whether or not he's really guilty. I mean, that's really the Reader's Digest version right there.
Right.
Right?
In other words, it's a setup.
Yeah, what?
In other words, it's a setup.
It's a setup. We're going to do this play, and I'm going to watch the king and how he reacts, because it's a play about a man murdering a king to take over his kingdom and marry his. It's basically parallel to the plot of Hamlet, right? So, okay, he sets up this scene, and he even tells his friend Horatio, I'm going to let them do the play. They're going to enact, basically, the murder of my father by my uncle, and we're going to watch my uncle. And the way he reacts is going to tell us whether he's guilty or not, so that I know whether the ghost was telling me the truth and I should go ahead with my vengeance, right? And that's exactly what happens, right?
Right.
Nope.
Not at all.
That's not what happens. Who causes the problem? Who steps in the way? Who messes everything up?
Hamlet.
How? Who's that smarty pants? I think I know.
Me.
That's Richard. Go, Richard. How does Hamlet mess it up?
He can't shut his mouth long enough to get a reaction out of anyone.
Ah, close. No cigar yet. What specifically does he do?
He jumps the gun.
By doing what?
He spoils the show for Claudius.
Spoils the show. You know me. You've been in my class. Be specific. What does he spoil?
He plays his hand.
What does that mean? Be specific.
I'm trying to remember the exact specific line that he said.
He ruins the money shot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right before Lucianus, the nephew, is gonna poison the king, what does he do? He gets up right in the king's grill and tells him what's happening.
I taught you that phrase.
What? Money
Get up in his grill.
Who's that?
Michael West.
Yeah, you did, actually.
Okay, back to Hamlet. Back to Hamlet.
So, but it's fascinating because there's something that happens next that everybody misunderstands. No, wrong. I'm not an everybody, nobody person. That a lot of people misunderstand, okay? So Hamlet is letting the play go on. He's kind of playing chorus. He's telling us what's happening because, frankly, I've read this play a million times and I wouldn't know what's going on if Hamlet wasn't telling me what's happening, right? So then, just at the moment when the murderer is going to murder the king, Hamlet steps up in front of, where the heck is it? Hamlet steps up in front of the king and says, he poisons him in the garden for his estate. What? His name's Gonzago. The story is extant and written choice Italian. You shall see anon how the murderer gets the love of Gonzago's wife. Right in his grill. Ophelia says, and we haven't even talked about Ophelia, poor thing, Hamlet's girlfriend. The king rises. Hamlet says, "Oh, what? Frightened with false fire." And Gertrude says, "How fares my lord?" Lord Polonius says, "Give over the play." And King Claudius finally speaks and says, what?
Light.
Yeah, who said that?
Say your name, Max.
Sarah's son-in-law.
Awesome. Yeah, give me some light. Away. Now, the mistake that is so often made, I think, and you're welcome to disagree with me because I love arguing about Shakespeare. Most people think that the play has worked, that Hamlet has done his job, and that the king is overcome by what he's been watching on the stage and happens to stand up just when Hamlet's being all weird to him and says, "Give me some light, away." And I would disagree. Yeah. I would suggest that the king is watching the play kind of half attendantly, paying attention to Gertrude, watching the play, paying attention to Gertrude, watching the play. Hamlet gets up in his grill. And that's what Claudius is responding to. "Give me some light, away." And he leaves, responding to Hamlet truncating, aborting the play, rather than letting it play out. Now, the problem here is twofold. One, Hamlet has not done what he said he was going to do. That's a classic Shakespeare technique. You know, Othello says he's not going to scar Desdemona's skin, and then after strangling her or after smothering her with a pillow, he basically stabs her. That's a whole nother night. But Claudius is responding to Hamlet himself, to whom he is incredibly keyed in. All right? It's not the play itself. And Hamlet has basically taken his own plot and cut it in twain, right? Cut it in twain. From then on, and I would argue, and for those of you who read this play or see this play or whatever, I would argue, watch closely for this moment in this play. Because I would argue that this moment, the moment where Hamlet cannot resist temptation any longer, and gets in Claudius's grill and says he murders him in the garden for his estate. What? His name's Gonzago, plays extant, but blah, 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 blah. I would argue that that's when this play becomes a tragedy. Because right from then, when he warrants Claudius's reaction of standing up, glaring at Hamlet, "Give me some light, away," and leaves, that nothing until Act 5 is really up to Hamlet anymore. And we know from our theater history that a tragedy is basically that a character puts himself in a position of no control by exerting errant control over his life. And that's what I believe. That takes us kind of roughly halfway through Hamlet. There's a lot more, and it's 9 o'clock. I'm perfectly willing to hang on here and answer your questions and talk about stuff. But as you kind of see, all I really want to do tonight is kind of get you guys jazzed about this stuff. I find this stuff fascinating. If anybody leaves here jazzed about this and wants to go pick up a Hamlet and read it, or wants to go pick up Goddard and read it, or just wants to go and like talk about Shakespeare, on Zoom with your friends these days, then I've done my job. Does anybody else have anything you want to like talk about, mention, ask me about Shakespeare or Hamlet or anything?
Yeah, I have a question.
Who's this?
I want to Charlie. We'll call him.
Okay.
I want to go back to the ghost for a minute.
Yes, perfect.
Is that a true, do you think the ghost is a true manifestation of Hamlet's father? Or is Hamlet simply conjuring up this ghost in his brain?
That's a really good question. And it's a question that I would suggest only 17 billion people have asked,
Yeah.
and no one has answered.
Well, we were talking about Freud before.
You have to remember two things. One, the others see it first.
Plus the fact that I think in that day and age, the idea of ghosts was not that. It was
No,
somewhat accepted.
if you're an audience and watching Hamlet at the Globe, you believe in ghosts.
Yeah.
That's a ghost. That's the ghost of Hamlet's dad. Oh my God. Right? Yeah. But what's most important is that he's a manifestation within Hamlet of something that drives him forward. I'm going to tell you a story. And again, this is a story out of Goddard. Here's my Bible. Goddard has a lovely habit of including in his essays anecdotes about interchanges with some of his old students. You know, often he includes the remarks of children about Shakespeare. And we all know that, you know, children and Shakespeare, that's a really special thing. He asked a student once that very question. Is this in this way, is the ghost of Hamlet's father, or is he the devil tempting Hamlet? Which is in a way what you're asking, right, Charlie?
Yeah.
I mean, it's, yeah. The way this girl answered the question is very interesting. She said, well, I don't think it really matters very much. Do you? And Goddard said, well, I don't understand. What do you mean? And she said, well, it seems to me that if he meets the ghost of his father and his father tells him to murder somebody, then that's the devil. Which is really, to me, the heart of the play. That Hamlet is being asked to do something that no man should do. Thou shalt not kill. It's that basic. And I think that, does Hamlet, oh, good question. Everybody's going to stay. We're going to be here till midnight.
There's two questions in the chat.
There are two? I've only seen the one. So that's my answer to the ghost question. I don't think it matters. I think what mostly matters is how the ghost affects Hamlet and what Hamlet does as a response. Right. And is he the father? Is he the devil? He could well be both, or neither. He could be a figment. Modern psychology calls it, the unconscious at work, as you did in your question. And I think that's fine, as long as it has the same effect on Hamlet as the ghost of Hamlet's father must have. The question on the table, the first one that I saw, was, does Hamlet like people? Anybody? Thoughts? Does Hamlet like people?
No.
Who says no?
What do you know?
Who else says no?
No.
Husband says
Mostly no's. Anybody want to say yes?
I'm going to say yes just for argument's sake.
Natalie Skelton from the old days. You say yes or no?
I'm going to say yes.
I say yes, just maybe not as all this stuff is going down. But he's got two friends.
Okay.
He's got two friends at the
I'm
very
going to answer the question for you. This is what I think. Again, remember the title of tonight is One Man's Hamlet. I could be, I don't speak for you, I speak for me. I believe there is one scene in which we see Hamlet in true light. There's one scene in which we see Hamlet unsullied by what's gone on. There's one scene in which we see Hamlet responding, letting the better angels of his nature speak. And that's the scene when the players enter the castle. When he addresses the players, when he speaks to the players, he's witty, he's charming, he puns, he wants to see them do their thing rather than do his thing by himself. And not only that, he gets the big idea for the crisis of the play by what happens in that scene. I would suggest that would suggest that at heart, in his deep soul of soul, heart of hearts, Hamlet loves people. But I would also argue that the people he's around every day in Elsinore aren't great examples of humanity. You've got Claudius, who murders his brother for the crown and his wife. You've got Polonius, who is nothing but an occasionally humorous politician who's willing to lie and spy and treat everybody with suspicion. You've got Gertrude, who is enthralled by a figure of masculinity and lust that her former husband was not, without any thought for what this might do to her family. I mean, you've got Ophelia, oh my God, whom we've left out. Ophelia, who's probably the most natural individual in the entire play, who is completely pushed and prodded and manipulated by everybody else to, of course, tragic ends because we know she dies. I would suggest that he does. I would also suggest that perhaps he hasn't met the people he belongs with. Because I think everything in the play suggests that he doesn't belong where he is, which is tough for a prince because you have responsibilities to fulfill, right? What was the comment that just came up? Something about, I don't think he's met, or I don't think there's, who said that?
I hear from Richard.
I was just making a point of like, I agree with you because I think Hamlet is such an artist that it's impossible to not love people. You cannot be an artist on the level that we see him be and not have a love of humanity. And
You saw the London production, didn't you, recently?
The one from the Globe?
Well, you saw it in DC, didn't you?
Oh yeah, the RSC one.
Yeah,
I saw that like 2 years ago. But and also just like what you were saying, if he hasn't found his people, Hamlet's an artist and he's living in a warlike state. He's surrounded by militants and non-artists. What's
another way to put that, Richard?
I have no idea.
He doesn't belong there.
He doesn't belong there. That's why we see him.
I ask anyone who has survived childhood to tell me that they have not at some time or other felt like they did not belong. And you've got this guy who doesn't even know he doesn't belong because he takes very seriously his life, his responsibility, his heritage, his tradition, who's told to do this dreadful thing because of all these other dreadful things that happen. He's been told to take life in response to the taking of life. I can't think of anything that is more counter to that than being an artist. Would we agree? Sure, why not? Anybody else?
Kit, there's another question in the chat.
Yes. What's that?
Is Hamlet the antagonist or protagonist? Because what you
Love
said
it.
is kind of a horrible person. And would you like to know who asked that question?
I would.
Olivia, your child.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, it's probably the question of questions with this play. Is Hamlet the protagonist or the antagonist? I would argue, and we teach this at school all the time. In playwriting, I teach it. In acting, they teach it. You know, who's the antagonist? Who's the protagonist? How does this dynamic work? Well, if you're gonna base it on sort of structure and how the play works, we have to say that Hamlet is the protagonist because he's the story we follow, right? It's his story. But this is where it gets dicey. Hamlet is also the one who constructs his own ruin because of all this. So I have no problem saying that it's really tricky and that Hamlet is both the protagonist and antagonist of the play that carries his name. There are bad guys, but that doesn't mean they're antagonists. Claudius is a bad guy. The ghost of Hamlet's father, to a certain degree, is a bad guy. You know, there are bad guys in the play, but I honestly think that it's Hamlet's responses to these various influences that cause him to be the antagonist in his own story. Now, if you wanted to tell me, no, that's not possible, that's against the rules, do something else. I'd say it's the ghost of Hamlet's father. I'd say it's the guy who tells Hamlet to commit murder. And then comes back later when Hamlet is moving away from that goal and says, remember what you're supposed to do. And by the end, how many murders has Hamlet committed? Do we know?
Too many.
How many? Let's count it up before we call it a night. How many murders does the artist Hamlet commit before the play is over?
Well, he kills Polonius.
He kills Polonius.
He nicks
He
Lear.
kills Laertes.
And then the king.
King.
He kills the king. There's two more.
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern.
There you go. His best friends of the past. What is his response when he kills them? What does he say about their loss?
He doesn't care.
They are not near my conscience.
Oh yeah, they go to it.
Yeah, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern go to it. Well, they are not near my conscience. They get what they had coming. Wow, that's an amazing thing to say. You know, from somebody who was at the beginning of the play so completely torn about this notion of life and death and whatnot. Does Hamlet ever fulfill his destiny? Now, of course, that's a trick question because you have to define it.
Yeah.
But in the narrowest sense, does Hamlet fulfill his destiny? He's the prince of Denmark, right?
No.
Folks, anyone?
Yep. Does he become king?
Does he?
No.
No.
Who says no?
Who's read the book?
All the naysayers are incorrect.
Oh yeah?
In the beginning of the play, in the first scene with Claudius and Hamlet, Claudius gives Hamlet his election as successor. The moment that Claudius dies, he becomes king. Not only does he become king, but he exercises his duties as king in giving his voice of election to Fortinbras as the new ruler of Denmark. People forget that a lot. That despite all of this, and this is an incredibly domestic tragedy, you guys. It's incredibly domestic. I mean, I did up a thing where, think about this. This is crazy. Really quickly. This is crazy. Where is it? Shoot. Sorry. Synopsis, there it is. It's an incredibly domestic tragedy. 15 of 20 scenes take place in private. It tells you the kind of play it is. It's very intimate, very intimate. And yes, at the end, Hamlet, and I've never seen it done this way, where Hamlet suddenly has that brief fleeting moment when the poison is coursing through his veins and he's about to collapse in Horatio's arms. I've never seen it where he's truly like, oh my God, this is my moment. And all of a sudden you're singing a Leslie Vercuse song. But you know what I mean? Shakespeare pulls a sleight of hand there. It's arguably, next to Lear, it's the most wrenching tragedy he ever wrote. And yet, he gives us a story of a man who fulfills his destiny. Now, whose idea of destiny is that? That's the question to ask. But anyway, as you can see, and oh my God, it's 9:15. This stuff absolutely just makes curls my toes. I love this stuff. And so I'll give it to Becky to maybe ask one more question because, oh my God, we're running late. What am I going to do?
And as luck would have it, there is one more question in the chat.
Good.
From Mr. Michael West. Thank you, Michael.
Uh-oh. Yes, sir.
Michael, you want to ask your question?
Okay. Earlier you mentioned that Hamlet's father says in the beginning what he does during the day.
Yeah.
He goes someplace, he suffers.
Yeah.
Okay, so just.
I'm gonna need you for this. Go ahead.
Okay, so okay, he's in hell.
Turn on your camera, dude. I can't see you.
My camera is on. I can see me.
I can see.
Max, can you see me? See, Max can see me.
I can see you.
He can see me.
Go ahead.
Anyway, so this is Mitch is maybe approaching it from an actor's perspective on how Hamlet's father would deal with Hamlet, but the fact that he gets Hamlet to do evil in order to take time off his sentence in hell. Maybe I've been watching too many legal shows, but you know, he's like, I can't think of the term. I also watch a lot of prison shows. I can't think of the term when somebody rats on somebody or gets them to, you know, like he's wired to make him, okay. Just a thought.
Well, here's the thing, is you're confusing two things, I think. The fact that Hamlet takes the charge and does what Hamlet Sr. wants doesn't mean that Hamlet Sr. has received, you know, the benediction and whatnot that he needs to ascend to heaven.
Right, not according to the text.
But or according to medieval religious dogma.
Right, but I'm thinking as an actor approaching the part.
Oh, dude, you're just generally screwed then.
Oh, okay.
No, I think what you need to do is not.
You can't handle the truth.
Yeah, you can. Oh, careful.
Yeah, I know.
What I think that the actor needs to adopt sort of a kind of a sacrificial sort of approach to it. That I'm done. I'm doomed. I'm damned. I have to roast in fires by day and all that kind of stuff. But you can do this thing that I need doing. They're not really connected. If you know what I mean. It's almost, there could be even a selfishness to it. I'm suffering, God damn it, I want my brother Claudius to suffer too. But that's a really good question that needs to be asked in production.
Okay.
But it's definitely an actor's question. How do you play that? And that's something that if you and I were in rehearsal, we'd talk about it, you know, until we found something obviously that worked for both of us. You know.
Or me, yeah.
Yeah. Remember too that the ghost doesn't explicitly say kill him. The ghost explicitly says, avenge his most unnatural murder. I don't know, so take that where you will.
Okay.
There's a lot of sort of theological history going on in here, and Shakespeare knew what he was doing. Shakespeare was playing both ends against the middle a little bit with this. You know, both criticizing through irony and also upholding dogma and all of that, because you've got this king who's dead, who had a bad death, man. He didn't get to confess his sins. He was killed with all his imperfections on his head, so he gets to go to purgatory and be miserable. You know. So what's Shakespeare doing there? Is he saying that that's the way it is, or is he saying that that's the way some people think it is, and really that's screwy? I mean, I don't know. You can go to town with that. My expertise is certainly not, you know, theology and history of the church. God knows. Anyway, that's my answer to that.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I used to be so good at answering your questions. So there you go, folks. I don't know. We could talk about Hamlet all night long.
This has been great. Thank you.
Sure. I've loved seeing everybody. Look at all these people.
Thank you for sharing this.
Sure. I'm just trying to share my enthusiasm. I hope some of it rubbed off, and, you know, go pick up a copy of the play. Oh, and by the way, just, you know, if you do pick up a copy of the play and you're reading the play, and if in Hamlet's first soliloquy, you know, oh, that this too solid flesh should melt. If your text says sullied, it's wrong. I just want to just say that. You can't address these purely academically. You can't address these purely linguistically. You have to address them by situationally. What's he saying, and how does the imagery work? Sullied flesh that melts, that doesn't mean anything. Solid flesh that melts, that means something. And that's a guide to how you edit your own production of Hamlet. that I will come and see. I love you all. You're great. I need to stop talking.
No, I
was
learned a
really
lot.
great, Kit.
That's great.
You've got some
So
nice
that's how to read a play.
comments in the chat too. There's some people in the chat saying, "Please do this again. I really enjoyed it."
Anybody, listen, I'll tell you what. I'll stay on for another 10 or 15 minutes if there's anybody who has like personal questions for me about like, why does he mistreat Ophelia?
Oh, yeah, that just popped in.
So if somebody wants to hang out, everybody, you're free to go, but I'm going to start answering private questions about Hamlet.
Okay,
Which
Kit.
sounds really weird.
Kit, about Ophelia, you're talking earlier about Hamlet's body count.
Yeah.
Wouldn't he, in the current legal world, wouldn't he be responsible for causing her death?
If you suppose that Ophelia dies because of Polonius's death, then yes.
No, but I
So
mean,
let's add
but
Ophelia
also,
to Hamlet's body
but also
count.
the fact that Hamlet has just been basically psychologically slapping her around.
Yeah, but that you're taking that in a modern sense, and that's tough to do.
Okay.
But I agree with you that we could add him to we could add her to the body count. As far as who asked the question about why does he beat the crap out of Ophelia? I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but why who asked the question about why he mistreats her? Somebody did.
That was Michael.
Yeah, he doesn't until something happens.
Oh.
You know, he doesn't until a very particular point in the play. What happens is it happens about a third of the way through or halfway through what we call the nunnery scene. Remember, Polonius and Claudius want to know why Hamlet's so messed up. So Polonius and Claudius, Polonius being Claudius's first minister, and Ophelia being Polonius's daughter and Hamlet's former girlfriend, Polonius and Claudius get Ophelia to walk here in the lobby so that Hamlet can encounter her and they can watch them interact, and then Claudius and Polonius can decide what's messing up Hamlet. Right?
Right.
So he comes in and he's primed for something serious because he just gives to be or not to be. He comes in at the top of the scene is to be or not to be. To be or not to be, should I kill myself, should I not? Should I kill myself, should I not? Oh, the fair Ophelia, nymph, in thy orisons be all my sins remembered. You know, I hope you're praying for me. And then they encounter each other and they have a scene. The scene is tense. He denies his protestations of love from before. He denies that he's sent her love notes and whatnot. We as the audience pretty much, for the most part, I would hope, see through that. And he's about to go away and leave her alone. And he turns back and has an interesting question. Where is your father? The question is ripe. It doesn't come out of anywhere. And almost every production that I've ever seen or done allows Hamlet to notice that he's being observed in the scene. So if Hamlet notices that Polonius is back behind a curtain, which is really stupid, why does that guy do that? He's back behind a curtain watching what's going on, then he's going to think, without asking questions, that Ophelia's in on it. Of all these people, the one person that he might have expected would not go against him, would not work against him, would treat him fairly, would be honest with him, is Ophelia. And in that moment, he discovers that, as far as he's concerned, she's not. And all hell breaks loose. If the one you love and you think loves you is so duplicitous as to set not only her own father, but the king against you in that moment, you're going to go a little mad. And he does. And I would argue that that's the closest he ever gets. This answers, I think, Steve's question. This is the closest he ever gets to being truly mad in both senses. He's mad, angry, and he's mad, loses it because of what she does or what he thinks she's done. And that's why he treats her so badly. Olivia, you had another question. Yes. Nobody's gone away. Oh, Papa had a question.
Yeah, it's in the chat. Do you see it?
I can't see it. What was the question?
It says, "Hey, Daddy, Papa wants to ask a question. What does
Go ahead, Papa. What's the story?"
Yeah. It says, hey, what does Hamlet mean by "Yonder lies the castle of my father"?
I swear to God, that's so time to be done. That's an inside joke that we won't talk about today, but I think that that's a cue that we need to be done.
Now let's talk. Let's talk about
Talk
about Tony Curtis.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I have another
The castle of
question.
my father. So
My father.
that's all I got, folks. I mean, I got more, but that's all you get tonight. You got to pay for any more.
Wait,
Thank you, Kit. Good to see you all.